panelists have been introduced, and it's a very, very interesting, important topic. It's a topic that all of us very closely follow. It's a topic that, there's a lot of activity happening in that area. So let's try and, if I can, start this discussion by asking Mr. Subhash Kumar, so just to set the context, right? So India is very uniquely placed when it comes to the energy sector, right? We have a unique energy basket. We have a very unique set of the energy resources that we have, right? Now, given that background and that uniqueness, how should we look at India's energy transition, right? What is the way ahead for India's energy transition with specific reference to green hydrogen? Yeah.
Thanks, Sudheer. I think as far as India is concerned, India is very uniquely positioned, and I agree with that. I think as far as India probably is going to be one of those countries where energy needs are going to continue to increase. And we will continue to use all sources of energy for quite some time. Even in 2050, if you really look at, our likely energy consumption will go up by a factor of 2.2 or so. And if you also add the kind of benefit we'll get from energy efficiency, that actually puts us in a stage where we will have, 5 to 8 times of increase in GDP. So from that perspective, as far as India is concerned, we cannot be making choice in favor of one over the other. We will need fossil fuels. As said earlier by Honorable Minister also, we'll continue to use coal, oil, gas, but probably there are going to be new age options, and especially India needs to harness the full potential of its natural endowments. And when I say so, I include two, which is biofuels, which has a huge potential. In fact, it has a very positive effect from ESG perspective and has huge potential to address the energy solution and with a lower carbon footprint, and especially hydrogen. So we will in fact require all of them, and when we were writing this, dealing with the Energy Transition Advisory Committee and writing our report, it somehow came to our mind that India is best positioned to capitalize on whatever advancement takes place in different spaces across the energy value chain. So I think for the time being, I stop at that.
Yeah, thank you. So you're basically saying we need all the resources. We can't, we don't have much choice there. We should go for all the a healthy mix of resources. And within the low carbon options that we have, hydrogen is definitely one really good option that we have. I want to turn to, because, so the moment we're talking about green hydrogen, it's a new technology being introduced into the country. And whenever new technology introduction happens, a lot depends on how well we are able to and how timely we are able to get it right on R&D front. And we have the Director R&D of Indian Oil here, Mr. Ramakumar. I want to understand from you, very simply speaking, where does India stand when it comes to R&D on green hydrogen? Do you see us taking the right steps? If yes, what are those? What are the good things that we are doing? And perhaps, what is it that more that we can do?
Thank you, Mr. Sudheer. And first of all, let me thank the organizers and you for inviting me to be on this panel, on this very important panel. So you asked the right question. On technology plane, where do we stand as far as green hydrogen is concerned? So before I answer that question, let me say that the entire hydrogen value chain can be subdivided into 4 levers: the production, the storage, transportation, and the final application. And in each of these levers, the entire world, I can vouch for the entire world, nobody has reached TRL 8 or TRL 9, technology readiness level. Everybody is hovering around TRL 4, somebody in TRL 4, somebody in TRL 5, somebody in TRL 6. Even the so-called electrolyzer technology for water splitting, which is touted as the production pathway for green hydrogen today, at best, as a scientist, as a career scientist, I rate the TRL level of electrolysis of water at not more than 6 on a scale of 10. It is still evolving. There are three pathways. If we talk only electrolysis, the alkaline, the PEM, the SOFCs, each one of them are having some positives and some negatives. But among the production technologies today, we have some kind of maturity if we have, that is for these two technologies, alkaline and PEM. But is there a last word that has already been spoken on these two? No, definitely not. There are many new electrolytic pathways which are on the horizon. There is an anion exchange membrane electrolysis that is going on. The electrolysis itself being questioned, especially for a country like India, because it is associated with huge water footprint. Can a country like India afford this kind of water footprint? You require for 1 kg production of green hydrogen, I'll just give the number so that you can understand the gravity of my statement. For 1 kg of green hydrogen production through any electrolysis pathway, you require at least 10 kg of deionized water. And given the hardness levels of our country, of the water, the raw water requirement is just getting doubled up. So for 1 kg of green hydrogen, you require in excess of 20 kg of water. So the need of the hour on the technology front is, can we directly use the seawater? We have seawater in abundance. So a lot of work is going on, including my own R&D started working on direct seawater electrolysis. But I would like to, it would be a very lengthy monologue if I talk each lever and the technology imperatives of each lever, but I would just like to limit for the time being in the production part of it. I talked about electrolysis. AEM is one technology which is the new kid on the block, which can really solve the demerits of both PEM electrolysis as well as alkaline electrolysis. But it is still at TRL 3 or 4 level. So there is a need for us, the scientific community, to focus on this new kid on the block and take it to the TRL at least 6 level. That is the imperative need. Seawater electrolysis is the one. But apart from electrolysis, I would like to say that we are ignoring a very valuable resource that we generate every year, a renewable resource every year, that is biomass. Biomass is 62 million metric tons of biomass every year we generate in this country. I do agree, because I saw skepticism on many of the faces when I say biomass. There are so many competing avenues for biomass today. The second generation ethanol, the third generation ethanol, then the compressed biogas. There are so many. In spite of that, biomass is in abundance. So if you can gasify the biomass, and if the yields of green hydrogen, are, if you can raise that by perfecting the gasification technology, probably biomass gasification into green hydrogen is one very good answer for a country like India. And I would stop with one statement. We could reason out with the policymakers very well to include green hydrogen produced through biomass gasification as one of the green hydrogen forms, so that it will be eligible for all the envisaged incentives. The definition of the green hydrogen is just finalized by MNRE, and in the definition we could able to include biomass pathways for green hydrogen production. So I think I would stop here and talk more about technology if you give me a chance.
Sure. I'm just curious to understand. You're saying so as far as biomass gasification is concerned, I want to understand if you can maybe briefly talk about what exactly it is that we are doing on that, yeah? Because you're saying, as far as resource availability is concerned, we have it in plenty, right? We also have the understanding and the wherewithal to do it. So where do we stand? What are we doing?
So any gasification technology today of biomass, conventional gasification technology yields just 40 grams of green hydrogen per kg of feedstock. And what we are working with Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, is that it gives you 110 grams of green hydrogen per kg of feedstock. That is the kind of technology that we are working. And how could we win the war of qualifying this hydrogen from biomass pathways as green hydrogen is that whatever CO2 that is getting generated out of this gasification of biomass can be and should be treated as biogenic CO2, and biogenic CO2 is a negative carbon footprint. So the hydrogen that is going to be produced through biomass pathways is entirely green and negative carbon. And we are setting up a big demo unit in our R&D center at Faridabad with this improved oxy-steam biomass gasification pathway and a very, very efficient purification system in tow along with that technology to demonstrate to the world and to the country that we can produce very effectively and efficiently green hydrogen with very high amount of yields.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. Let me now turn to Deepesh. Deepesh, we have heard the version of Mr. Ramakumar here, and he's a career scientist, right? Very, very technical guy for us. But can you help us understand? So one of the things about green hydrogen is that it's important from decarbonization point of view, right? I want to understand from you, if you can simplify for us, what is the kind of role actually that you see green hydrogen playing as far as decarbonization of our power generation segment is concerned, very broadly speaking? Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Sudheer, and thanks for having me here. This is an opportunity for me to meet so many industry colleagues that we otherwise don't get to meet that easily. So thanks, to ET in a big way. Now, to answer your question in terms of how does hydrogen play a role in decarbonizing the electricity sector, I think it's a pertinent one because in the carbon emission profile, 40% of carbon comes from electricity. And hence, if you look at that segment, there's a lot of work done in terms of solar and wind. But I think the era of pure play solar and wind is probably, getting behind us. With that is the advent of hybrids. And you're seeing a lot of steps taken in terms of coming up with around-the-clock green electricity. So if you draw, the PLF continuum to hit, say, 85% PLF green electron on a round-the-clock basis, you can still make do with batteries. And each time when you do this, you've got to solve for the cost equation, that is it affordable. Now, the moment you cross 85%, as per the analysis that we have done, in partnership with a few of my colleagues here on the stage, if you want to hit, say, 90% PLF and keep it all green, so then the option is you combine wind, solar, maybe batteries, along with very large hydro, nuclear, or hydrogen. And then you apply the cost equation to this. And if you test at today's cost, at current cost, which is the most viable, for India, I'm talking the range of 6 to 7 rupees per kilowatt hour. I think that's where the element of hydrogen comes in. Now, within this, the first question comes up that what's the round trip efficiency of this entire circuit when it comes to hydrogen utilization? See, the bias is to encourage the use of as much wind and solar as you can and to minimize the use of hydrogen and solve for the equation that I'm going to give you 90% PLF round-the-clock green electricity. I'm hopeful that the government comes up with a few quote-unquote sample tenders, in the range of, say, 300 to 500 megawatts, where, the clause should say that can you demonstrate round-the-clock green with more than 90% availability? And that's where the aspect of hydrogen fits in. It will check the box on cost. It will check the box on sustainability. And of course, when it comes to fuel security, you're using all your domestic infrastructure, be it water, be it electrolyzers, be it, the nature's blessings on wind and solar. So I think that's the equation that hydrogen will play a fantastic role to solve. Now, how real is this? So if you zoom out and see what's happening across the world, Australia is a fantastic case in point. Australia is taking massive steps. One is because of all the vantage point advantage that they have in terms of very good land resource, renewable energy resource, coming up with large scale tenders backed by financing. It's also become a jobs agenda for the Australian government in many of the states, whether it's Queensland, whether it's South Australia. We're seeing in the range of 200 to 400 megawatts of round-the-clock green electricity at the back of hydrogen, which are on live tender basis right now. So it's very much here and now that we'll get to see this. And probably it's time for India, to start looking at this as long as our requirement is defined as more than 90% availability.
Deepesh, you talked about cost. Let me ask you, how far away we are from the $1 figure per kg of green hydrogen?
I think we're very far when it comes to India. When it comes to the United States, thanks to IRA, probably they'll get there obviously very, very faster. But the benefits of what happens in the Western market in terms of technology development, what my colleague eloquently explained in terms of, technology breakthrough that we need on electrolyzer, I think we can benefit. So I'm okay being the, incumbent and not the leader there, because the benefits of what the $369 billion of funding that the US is offering for its players in the domestic market, a lot of that benefit can be leveraged by India in the subsequent phase of how decarbonization happens.
Okay. Mr. Mehrotra, I want to understand from you at this stage, so there are different, views that we have got so far on green hydrogen. What's your assessment of the kind of groundwork that India has done to get it right on the National Green Hydrogen Mission?
Sure, okay, thank you very much. See, a lot of groundwork has already happened, and we should compliment the government for laying the foundation for it, whether it is the National Green Hydrogen Mission, where an outlay of more than, I think, 19,000 crore is put in, kind of. However, what we need to remember is that this is just the start. And we need to look at the entire ecosystem of the whole hydrogen chain, as my fellow panelist has spoken about, in terms of whether we talk of production of green hydrogen, we talk of storage, transportation, and use. Now, if we talk of each of them, kind of where we are in terms of where the world is, first thing, and then so there are certain imperatives which also India is used to. First is production of green hydrogen, and I think we need to make this affordable for any fuel to succeed in India. And we've seen, I'm being from the gas sector, even gas at $5-6 doesn't get dispatched in power sector. And so to make hydrogen really penetrate in the whole country, you need to make production of hydrogen affordable. And for that, I think there are certain technological breakthroughs are required, and definitely the cost today it ranges from $4 to $8 depending on what technology you're talking of. We need to bring it to $1 to $2. Otherwise, I think there can be incentives given by the government, but that can work only in the interim. But in the long run, we have to bring the cost down. So that's the first part of the game where we need to kind of, and that's, I think, the private sector and government needs to work together to make it happen. The second important part is storage and transportation. And there are various modes of storage and transportation. And then I being from transportation sector, we talk of whether you can use ammonia as a media. You can use, for small quantities, you can use trucks. And for that also ecosystem needs to be developed. And you need to have dedicated pipelines for hydrogen for hubs where they are. And also we can use the current natural gas pipelines which can blend hydrogen and transport it. So that's another part where a lot of work needs to be done. And this is the segment where it's been less talked about in the government sector. We talked more of production and use, while this gets a little bit bypassed. So we need to work, and there's a lot of work going on in terms of standards, rules of the game, and who can play in this whole segment, which is storage and transportation. And then it comes to use cases, kind of. And while we are speaking here, we talked of power sector as one big use case, whereas, so the government has started in the right direction by making certain percentage of hydrogen blending compulsory in refineries and others. I think, but however, we need to go full scale and then say, okay, how the users try to kind of use hydrogen as more affordable fuel in their whole energy mix, kind of, right? So I think we're still far behind. The world is a little ahead of us, but we're catching up there. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So that's a very, optimistic tone taken by all of our panelists. One of the things that I really wanted to point out and probably understand is that, we just had Kerala Additional Chief Secretary making, that presentation. And Kerala is one state which is part of that, national level hub plans, right? So there's a plan to develop green hydrogen hubs. And, as a model, we are still in that phase where we're trying to understand where we go with that. Right, so multiple states are there, many hubs are being looked at, and so that's very interesting. And that the reason why I'm pointing it out is because we're talking about cost and getting the entire ecosystem in place. So perhaps that's one model to look forward to. But anyway, my next question is again for Mr. Kumar, and we're talking about cost here. What is it that companies like, let's say, ONGC Group, who have a lot of experience, many years, who also have a lot of, let's say, cash reserves, how can they utilize this entire opportunity which is thrown open, let's say, as a business opportunity from green hydrogen to, convert the national ambition into a success?
Okay, so companies like ONGC normally is associated with upstream, but probably lesser understood fact is that we are one of the large, downstream companies with refining capacity within the group of close to 55 to 60 million metric tons, which is large enough. And also very significant presence in petrochemicals. And we are across all the value chain. So I think one is that expertise exists within the system and within the group to handle the hydrogen. So first and foremost case would be to use internally, let's say in the group refineries. So that would be an area where we perfect the technology and use it at scale, capture the learnings, and then think in terms of going beyond. Second thing is also we have exposure to, also we have equity in quite a few downstream gas companies also, as Akhil ji had said, that probably that's going to be another use case where actually we should start experimenting with even limited mixing of hydrogen in the gas value chain. Third unique advantage of ONGC is that ONGC is probably has a subsidiary which is most internationalized company of India, which is ONGC Videsh. We have international alliances. We deal with probably the best name both in entire energy chain. So consequently, we can leverage some of the relationships which we have globally through ONGC Videsh, and both, work along with them to take this to scale and also, create benefit from the whatever tailwinds are being created by international changing fiscal regimes or supports which are coming. So I think a company like ONGC is very, very strategically located to be part of solution to take hydrogen to scale. And I would say that, we are in a position to act local, which means think global, act local. Because whatever we learn, so we have a global spread, wherefrom we learn, capitalize on it, and then be part of a very unique solution which is necessary for local transition as far as India is concerned. India will have to be a very unique pathway for dealing with its transition.
Okay, thank you. Cristian, I wanted to ask you, you've heard all of these panelists and, there's a unique perspective coming in from all of them. I want to understand from you, what is the global, or let's say, what is the Norway perspective of India's, experience of the kind of steps we are taking towards green hydrogen? Is that broadly in line with, like he said, think global and act local? Is this, that kind of approach? How do you look at, when you put that approach in the larger global context, where do you think we stand? Are we thinking about it rightly? What more is required perhaps?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting me. It's indeed a real pleasure to be here among this very esteemed panelists. I think India is the place to be. to be very honest. And India has emerged as a global leader in the energy transition with a very strong and fast growth in renewable energy sector. I think what is happening in India now reminds me very much of when the oil and gas era emerged in Norway, where we didn't have the technologies. We obviously had the resources, and there was a question of how can we take advantage of these resources by implementing technologies. And we went abroad to apply these technologies that were already there from the US, and then the sector emerged, and today we are the world leader in offshore oil and gas exploration. But before we started with oil and gas, we actually produced green hydrogen, and 100 years ago we produced green hydrogen for fertilizer production. So this is nothing new to know. It's just that the cost of hydrocarbons became so low, it was just so much low-hanging that we sort of forgot about the first industrial success of Norway. But now we're coming back to hydrogen, and I'm very fortunate to be as a commercial counselor to facilitate a lot of collaborations between Norwegian technology companies and Indian industrial players, such as Indian Oil, which is collaborating with Green Start. We also have ONGC collaborating with ETENer, our broad energy company, one of the world leaders in offshore oil exploration, on low carbon solutions and also in offshore wind. So I think coming back also to the point of your question, I think with one of the lowest levelized cost of energy, India is indeed very well positioned to become a green hydrogen hub, and both for domestic offtake but also for exports. That is quite clear. I think also that the National Hydrogen Mission does represent a very good and adequate, discrete plan, and I have to commend the government for the approach by involving the industry, even foreign missions like the Norwegian one, and also international companies, and also looking at the response from the Indian industry, including the PSUs and other private players. I'm quite optimistic as far as reaching sort of a break even in the production cost of green hydrogen. Going forward, I think it would be instrumental to see further clarity for project developers in terms of incentives for export-oriented volumes. I think we do talk to a lot of developers, companies from Norway and even also from the European continent, and going forward, walking together towards this end game where we have $1 per kg or $1.50 per kg. I think it would be important to still talk together, collaborate under this National Hydrogen Mission, which is, I believe, also just a start. It has to be scaled, it has to be developed, because the technologies that are here today, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, they weren't that relevant. I think in 5 more years, we will have new technologies, both in green and also in other, let's say, colors of hydrogen. And that brings me also to my last point. What I think would be very, very crucial for India at this stage of the energy transition is to be technology agnostic. Biomass was mentioned. I think that's one of the most low-hanging fruits we have as far as cost is concerned, availability, supply chain. So that would be, one of the points that I want to make. And yeah, I think I'll pause there and give the word back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Cristian. You're basically saying India is the place to be. This is the place where we're going to see a lot of, reduction in levelized cost of electricity as far as green hydrogen is concerned. Talking about incentives, the National Green Hydrogen Mission document, if you look at it, it has, I think, a separate chapter on incentives, right? So we have some of them announced by the government, but then, of course, I do believe that, That's, we need more discussion and debate on topics like incentives, of course. You also touched upon, the work being done by PSUs, and that brings me to Mr. Ramakumar, So IOC, Indian Oil, is one of those companies which is, which are known for, being the early mover in green hydrogen, right? We started our pilot project many, many years ago, right? Before the discussion was at the national scene. So if you could give us a brief, let's say a glimpse of what those projects are, what are we trying to achieve, and what stage of development are we in, right? They are still pilot, or how far are we from moving from the pilot stage to the, let's say, the commercial stage?
So like my colleague Mr. Subhash Kumar was mentioning about ONGC, IOC is also one of the, Indian Oil Corporation is one of the first movers in hydrogen. While we have been experimenting since 2000, now we have a firm plan that 50% of our total hydrogen that is to be consumed by our refiners by 2030 should be converted from grey to green. This is our firm plan. It amounts to 700 total. Our projection is 700,000 metric ton per annum by 2030, and out of which at least 350,000 metric ton per annum we would be converting it into green hydrogen at our refineries. The first green hydrogen plant on a commercial scale is going to come up at Panipat refinery, which is going to be 7,000 metric ton per annum, 7 MTPA. I think brisk preparations are going on. But on the other hand of it, we have many pilot projects. We are going to run, we are the first one to actually experiment with hydrogen by injecting a certain volume of hydrogen in CNG, and we ran 50 DTC buses in Delhi NCR region as normal CNG buses for 6 months. That is at the peak of the COVID. We did this. We constructed a huge plant in one of the Delhi bus depots. We have a patented technology of partial reforming of natural gas into hydrogen CNG mixtures. But now we are working on, we want to run 15 hydrogen fuel cell buses in Delhi NCR come October. I think already buses are there with us. We got 15 buses through competitive bidding from Tata Motors. Now it is an open secret, so I can discuss this. These buses are under homologation process at Tata Motors and ARAI. And from October onwards, we are going to run these buses from Faridabad to Delhi NCR region. And the hydrogen dispensing station is ready to dispense hydrogen at 350 bar compression pressure, and it can be risen to 700 bar. Nowhere in the country 700 bar. What to talk of 700 bar? Even 350 bar is not there. We have a second dispensing station ready and operating at our Gujarat refinery in Koyali.
Sir, 700 bar in public transport?
I mean, that is the storage pressure.
Okay. Is it safe?
Yeah, it is very much safe. Only thing is your storage cylinder should be type 3 and 4. Cylinder and the metallurgy need to be commensurately robust. Otherwise, it is absolutely safe. We are not the first one to run at 700 bar. I mean, UK is running already. So, with absolutely no. And one more thing I would like to share with this august audience. There's a lot of buzz that is going on for waste to energy projects in the country. From organic waste to compressed biogas, and this compressed biogas can be used as a auto fuel. So we are experimenting to reform this compressed biogas into green hydrogen. We have a demo unit coming up again in Faridabad. Once this is successful, probably wherever there is no CNG demand in certain locations, that CBG can be converted into green hydrogen by reforming, simple reforming, steam methane reforming, but only difference is you have to use renewable electricity to run your SMRs. So this is another project that we are running. As Mr. Jyotilal in the previous session said that we are also in advanced dialogue with Kerala government to build the infrastructure, dispensing infrastructure, so that they have a plan of running 10 hydrogen-based fuel cell buses from Kochi airport to Trivandrum. So there also, if they can make us available the renewable electricity and the land, then we are ready to set up the dispensing stations, produce the green hydrogen and run the buses. So many more plans are there, but the big ticket item is our refinery hydrogen is going to be converted. 50% of our refinery hydrogen, what we are going to produce or use, will be green by 2030.
Okay, thank you, sir. Deepesh, I wanted to ask you, so gas has a role to play in this entire green hydrogen story, and GE is known for gas turbine technology and equipment. So what is the kind of significance that, gas turbines have? If you can, help us understand the basics of it when it comes to, providing round-the-clock, green, affordable power.
Sure. So, when it comes to India, the gas turbine story is constrained when it comes to grid-based gas power, other than a few exceptions in the Northeast, for example, where you have OTPC that runs pretty much baseload on natural gas. But then the industrials in India, I'm talking of refineries, petrochemicals, fertilizer plants, are predominantly powered by gas-based power. There was a case in 2015-16 in one of the large refineries in India, in the western part of India, where they gasified pet coke, which was the final residue of the refining process. Now, that had as much as 40% hydrogen, which is a component of syngas. So what GE did in that project is that we retrofitted our gas turbines to burn a very high content hydrogen fuel, and we also supplied factory fitted brand new turbines. Now that's an example of a plant that's running close to 2000 megawatts base load on extremely high hydrogen. So the point that I'm trying to make is that the Indian infrastructure on gas turbine can be made use of to burn hydrogen. The other is that recently in Egypt, alongside COP27, we actually demonstrated live 100% hydrogen capability. And I took a cue from that, and I had a discussion with the Delhi government that the Pragati plant that we have here in Delhi, on the lines of G20, we can retrofit that to burn hydrogen. We've also been talking extensively with the Indian government on the earlier model that I explained, that go high PLF 90% green, and that's where you can use the peaking gas turbines, the aeroderivative gas turbines. Each time I look at it from the perspective of how real it is. And since we have a board member from ACME here who can say this much more eloquently than I can say, ACME has come up with a plant in Bikaner where they have the full setup, solar, hydrogen, green ammonia. Now, the thing is that we've got to scale it. I'm hoping that the second half of the year, we see actual tenders coming up, from the Indian government, be that the center or state, for round-the-clock green electricity, which is where you can use the gas turbine technology. Now, this is not just GE. I think most gas turbine manufacturers can make this available. And the advantage of doing that is that you can still keep a cap on the cost of electricity by going, high renewable green.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mehrotra, we are talking about companies here and their specific plans. I wanted to understand from you, as far as, the national green hydrogen story and the ambition is concerned, how does it fit into, pipeline infrastructures? How does it align with your growth? And what exactly are you doing there?
Sure, okay. So what we are doing, basically, we transport natural gas as a business. So we have, and as we all know that the transportation network for natural gas is huge in the country, and new pipelines are being developed. At the best, the utilization of these pipelines will be 40 to 50% as per the gas available in the country. So we are leading that effort to blend hydrogen with a natural gas pipeline. So now what that will do is, one, utilize this pipeline, which is the national asset available to you, and two, kind of decarbonize this chain as well, kind of. As PIL, what we have done is we have led this effort. We have done some desktop studies as we speak. DNV has helped that in that, along with National Grid in UK. The initial studies point out that we can blend 8 to 10% hydrogen by volume in a pipeline without any big modification, which is very encouraging, and most of the countries in the world like UK and Europe has moved towards that. We can move till 20 to 30%. There are certain constraints regarding our gas turbine units, and we are now in a process. So this is the first step, is a desktop work. The next step for pipeline operators and others is to really go for testing. Other countries are doing that. We're in discussion with government and Center of High Technology to use and see if we can test some of the pipelines for different metallurgy, for embrittlement, and some of our equipments, because hydrogen is a lighter molecule. So once that is done, and I hope so that in next, I'll say 3 to 5 years, we will be ready to blend hydrogen in all these pipelines. Even if we blend 10 to 30%, the volume required of hydrogen is huge. And kind of as we speak, India will take another 5 years to produce some reasonable green hydrogen at a reasonable price, if I say that. In addition to that, because blending may take time, we are working with OEMs, and possibly we started discussion, GE is one of them. We have large gas turbine units, so which burn a lot of methane. And again, it's a cleaner fuel, but not the cleanest fuel. So we will blend hydrogen in these GTCs, and we are also looking electrifying this fleet with green hydrogen to decarbonize our own chain. So we are playing our own role as far as the hydrogen value chain goes, and we are committed to decarbonize this chain as far as possible.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Cristian, if I can ask you perhaps the last question of this discussion, and you may have slightly covered it when you talked earlier. So what are the, as a takeaway, what are the top 3 things that you think we can learn from Norway's experience of green hydrogen?
Well, first of all, I think we are learning a lot from each other at this stage of the transition. As I mentioned, there are a lot of good discussions between industries, as well as government to government. We early this year in February, we established the so-called task force on energy, joint task force on energy between Norway and India, and that is to create this platform for common understanding. And it's a task force on energy, not on hydrogen. That is because, like I said, it's so important to have this holistic approach and technology agnostic approach at this stage of the transition. But obviously, we are a technology knowledge-based nation, and subsequently our industries. So still there is a lot to bring to India from Norway as far as technologies are concerned. Another thing that is also I would emphasize is this cluster mindset that we have developed in Norway, and I therefore welcome this hub development approach from the Indian government. But we are extremely good at sharing resources, infrastructure, even cost. I was myself brought up in the subsea industry in Norway. The largest subsea cluster in the world is in Bergen, my hometown, and there we had a cluster consisting of businesses, academia, research, government. We had supply chains collaborating with each other, openly sharing, like I said, infrastructure, resources, information. So I think that is something that we can bring that knowledge, and we certainly are towards the MNRE and also other ministry. In fact, last week I was in Norway with the Ministry of Port Shipping and Waterways, and as all of you probably know, Minister Sonevald has launched this hydrogen hub concept with the nominated ports in Dindayal, Tuticorin, and Paradip. So that is, we welcome that, and also the ability to work across ministries. That's a very important factor, and that is something that we have achieved in Norway. And I think looking at how the hydrogen mission is moving forward, I'm optimistic as far as India is concerned. I think also lastly, and third, that we have a hydrogen strategy in Norway that is very robust and scalable. So that's why I also mentioned that the hydrogen mission, and was also mentioned here before, is a start. It's a living document that has to be, further developed as technologies are developed also, and business models, and we see the emergence of new innovations. What we lack in Norway, and that is also important to say, and that also is a point, that we lack scale in Norway. That has enabled us to think internationally and to go out to the international markets to implement our solutions. And that is something we lack, but still that also makes us, I would say, very relevant to the Indian market, both industries as well as government. So these are the 2-3 things that I would emphasize. Thank you.
No, that's more than 3.
Is it?
No, but honestly, very, very relevant, Cristian, because like you're saying, the ability to work across ministries. In our kind of setup, right, interministerial consultations can take a long, long time. So a very relevant point there, right? And also the other point about, learnings from the point of view of hub or cluster approach, right? Because so from that point of view, you're already there. So if we can learn something from that, that's good. So that brings us to an end of this discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Are there any questions or, okay, so please go ahead.
You mentioned that it's a 100-year-old technology, but what's going to be the cost of production of green hydrogen? Someone says $1, someone says $5. The Acme Energy has already set some numbers on green hydrogen as well as green ammonia. Now the question is that 30 liters of seawater is required, that is to be desalinated, and then is to be used into the electrolyzers. The fertilizer sector, which consumes about 60% of hydrogen, is still not on board in the policy. Is MNRE the right ministry for making policy? The policy doesn't include any fiscal issues, which are very important. So policy is incomplete in its sense. But my big question is that, who should really make the policy? The Petroleum Ministry, Fertilizer Ministry, or MNRE?
If I hazard an answer, probably I'll be losing my job. But let me make a generic statement. Who has to make the policy? Who has to execute it? I really don't know. I don't want to trade into that zone. Whosoever may be the policy maker, the producer is going to be oil industry. Producer is going to be oil and gas industry, and there are many user industries. Oil itself is a big consumer. It's the largest producer even today, and largest consumer as well. Now this mission roadmap is prompting us to explore new users other than refining or other than oil and gas. So fertilizers, steel, then mobility, in that order. As long as these three sectors don't come on board, I think our hydrogen dream, realizing our hydrogen dream would be very, very difficult.
I'll just add quickly
So
to
who
that.
has to make the policy? Let's leave it to the government.
Yeah, Deepesh, please go ahead.
I'll just add a quick. I think the ministries can play a role in setting the mandates to get net neutral, net zero by the timeline that we have set for ourselves, say 2070 in this case. And I would say that in addition to the public sector, the private sector also looks at this as a very, lucrative opportunity to be a supplier of sorts to these ministries and the plants that come under those ministries. So I think the mandates can be defined with a timeline to implementation, and that will drive demand, and that will then drive investments.
On that optimistic note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. We are closing this discussion. Thanks.